A jarring new cast, flashbacks, blood, and baggage. The prequel nobody asked for, but somehow it kinda worked. Okay, let's get real from the start. Dexter should have stayed dead. We all felt it, right? The original finale, that lumberjack ending, it was like watching your favorite character drive off a cliff and then just keep going and never fall. But then came New Blood, a weird, icy apology. The only thing it got right was 86ing the character. And now, Original Sin, a prequel, a show that by every logical standard should not work. A prequel about a serial killer's origin story sounds like a corporate pitch meeting a fever dream. And yet, here we are, watching it, talking about it, maybe even liking it. And maybe even I can change your mind a little bit about it if you don't like it right now. So how the hell did Dexter Original Sin pull this off? Maybe, kinda. Let's talk about why it should have failed 100%, but kinda didn't. So let's start with the impossible premise. Dexter Original Sin was born into a trap.
Yeah, no shit.
You can't just replace creepy but cool Michael C. Hall. He wasn't just an actor. He was the voice, the smirk, the conscience of the whole entire show. His inner monologue was the show's identity. So when they announced that there would be a younger Dexter, fans braced for disaster. And from the get-go, I'm not sure the trailers convinced people, except that killer voiceover. Because we've seen this happen time and time again, right? Gotham without Batman, Sheldon without irony, Solo without Han. You know, the prequel trap is very, very real. You know where it's going. You always know where a prequel's going. It's going to the thing that you love the best. So the why has to be perfect. The why are you making this has to be right. And that's what makes Original Sin so risky. It's walking that tightrope between nostalgia and necessity. But here's where it got a little bit clever. Instead of trying to imitate Michael C. Hall, it kind of studies him. The new Dexter doesn't feel like a reboot per se. It feels like a ghost of the future of things yet to come, already haunted by who we know he will become. It's eerie and somehow it works, but it also doesn't work. Don't get me wrong, it also really doesn't work. And I'll touch on it more in a bit, but for starters, we know that there's no real danger for Dexter. We know this because we know what he becomes in the future and the people around him. The tension is therefore completely gone. So let's move to my first rule of known endings of prequels. Prequels live or die by this one rule. If we already know the ending, every moment before it needs to redefine what we know, not just get us to that point. And without ruining what we liked about the original. A lot of the time, this runs the risk of destroying what we liked about the original in the first place. And that's where Original Sin kind of surprised me. It's not about a serial killer being born. It's about a code being built, step by step, and showing you all of the foibles and the problems along the way. We finally see Harry's code forming in real time, and not just as a set of rules, but as a parental failure disguised as a moral structure for Dexter. Yes, the guy from Heathers, Christian Slater, plays Harry not as a mentor, but as a man terrified of his son. And while we're on this, let's talk about Harry. How does Harry end up looking like this in the flashbacks? And don't get me started on flashbacks within a prequel, whereas he looked like this back in the 80s. It really doesn't make sense when we have such great de-aging tech right now. This looks ridiculous and adds to some of the reason why this series didn't really work. And I know I keep going back and forth saying it didn't work and saying it did, but two things can be true at the same time. Harry's basically like, you can't stop killing, so I'll teach you how to do it correctly. That's not parenting, that's control. And it's fascinating because we, the audience, already know how badly this code can fail. We're watching a father engineer a monster, but with love and with care. And that's the twisted brilliance of this show. It turns inevitability into tension. Every act of love feels like a countdown. Okay, next up, I want to talk about the Miami problem. The original Dexter made Miami a character, and I know some people hate saying it's an additional character, but the heat, the rot, the sun, the glinting off the bodies and the blood, the show's identity was pastel death. It was beautifully shot. So how do you recreate that without looking like a cosplay version of the original show? Well, you don't, and you have to stylize it. But this is one place where I think overall they failed. It felt exactly like a cosplay of the original show. This was no fault of the actors really, I guess. It's just Original Sin goes for something different. A grimy analog Miami. Less postcard and more VHS style. Like, it feels like the 90s, or at least what the 90s would have looked like through an MTV CRT screen. The lighting is hazy, the police cars are boxy, and everything smells like cigarette and moral decay. So you could say that it was a smart choice, especially for someone coming new, because it builds authenticity without pandering to nostalgia. But I'm not saying that. You can tell someone behind the show loved the original, but didn't worship it. They weren't like super into it. Okay, next, let's talk about the core of Dexter. So Dexter was about connection and empathy. A man pretending to be human, and then slowly realizing he might actually be human. That's the quiet genius of Original Sin. It's not trying to justify his darkness. It's making you feel sorry for him again, like someone with an illness. That's the part that got lost after season 4 in Dexter, in my opinion. The empathy. So we're seeing a Dexter who doesn't understand the world yet, who's trying to copy emotion like a second language. And that's quite powerful for the show to do, because it definitely lost that later on and more indulged what he liked. And don't forget, that's what made us watch him in the first place. And by going back, the show reconnects with the original emotional DNA. Because when you strip away all those kills and plastic wrap, Dexter is a story about a lonely man who wants to belong. He has a secret to hide, yes, but he wants to belong and fit in, and that's the story. So the next thing about prequels, especially this one, is that the audience knows too much. We don't want to watch a story we already know, because we know too much. We know who Dexter becomes. We know who Deb is. We know what Harry's code will lead to. And yet that knowledge is what gives Original Sin its power. So hear me out. When young Dexter smiles, we see the ghost of the future ahead of him, behind him. When Harry says, "Trust me," we hear the echo of that failure that's going to happen in the future. It's tragic irony, and it works because we're complicit. It's set up as a prequel in every way. So you wouldn't want to watch this before you watch the original season. It's a prequel. It's a prequel that you should watch after you watch the original Dexter. And that turns the show into something new. A character study built entirely on foreknowledge. That's rare, and that's kind of smart writing. So let's be honest, most prequels fail because they treat nostalgia like a currency. And we've seen that more and more recently. They just fill in the blanks nobody asked for. Here's how Han got his name. Here's how Dumbledore met Grindelwald. But Dexter Original Sin takes the opposite approach. It's not answering questions. It's reinterpreting moments that we thought we perhaps knew very well. It's asking, what if Harry's code wasn't wisdom, but guilt? What if Dexter's empathy didn't fade? It was just suppressed all along. What if the monster we met in 2006 wasn't born evil, but taught how to survive? That flips the prequel formula. It's not filling in lore, it's recontextualizing morality or history of the show. That's why it felt fresh. So we talked about Harry and Christian Slater. We need to talk about ladies' favorite, newly cast James Bond, Patrick Gibson, cast in the game. Replacing Michael C. Hall is like replacing Walter White. You're just not gonna do it. You can't. So Gibson doesn't try. And this is where I went into, before even watching it, hating it, because I assumed he would. But instead, he plays Dexter like a sketch of the man we'll know later on. So we know the voice isn't going to be the same, but it was decent. It's quieter and more uncertain. The smile isn't confidence, it's camouflage. And somehow that restraint that this guy used works. That first moment of fascination on Dexter's face is absolute gold dust. It's like watching the spark of someone you wish you could stop. And then that's the magic. That's the point that we're looking for in this series. We know where Dexter's road leads to, but we can't look away because this guy knows how to take us there. So let's summarize this, because on paper, it should have been a mess. Recasting an iconic role, revisiting a dead, now incredibly lively franchise, telling a story where we already know the ending, competing against its own legacy, and yet Dexter Original Sin works because it doesn't pretend to be the old show. Although they did use Michael C. Hall's voice for the voiceover, which I thought was absolute genius. So what it did right was remembered why we cared in the first place. Did it do it well? Was it overly cheesy? Looked like cosplay? Some of the acting was incredibly forced? Yes. But did they kind of pull it off? Make it enjoyable? Yes. Can you live without watching this? Yes. This show got away without relying too much on nostalgia, and it gives a tragedy, empathy, and philosophy instead of just a body count. It takes that mask off a monster and lets us see the guy underneath. And maybe that's what the show is really about. Not the kills, not the code, but the curse of understanding yourself too late. So yeah, Dexter Original Sin should have failed, and it did because it's been cancelled. Let's make that clear. But at the same time, it does work if you're a fan of the series, because in a strange way, we don't just watch Dexter. We can forgive him a little bit more every time. And maybe that says more about the viewer than it does about him. It asks us, do monsters ever really change? One thing I didn't like were flashbacks within a prequel. I mean, come on, you're already talking about the past. How can you then bring in a flashback? It's like a flashback within a flashback. There's got to be some kind of rule against that. And those flashbacks and the effect they use for the flashbacks look like it was made on an old Windows Movie Maker or something. However, very unnecessary. And we got to see some firsts for Dexter.
Woo, mama!
So I know this will be quite divisive, so let me know what you think. I'm kind of on the fence, but I think for me it was an enjoyable watch. If you liked watching this video, please give it a thumbs up and drop a comment, because I want to hear what you have to say too. Catch you in the next one.